Hi, I'm Gillian, and I'm glad to be sharing with you again today. I'm going to talk today about finding hope when your dreams seem to have all but disappeared. Have you noticed that life can be going in a certain direction and then wham! Life comes along, it gives you a side swipe. You weren't expecting that. Your eyes were on the road ahead. You frequently are checking your rearview mirror. Nothing could have prepared you for that unexpected side swipe, and the consequence of it? Your life is now spinning out of control and it finally comes to a stop. You're shaken. You're not facing the right direction. In fact, you're not facing any direction. You're straddled across two lanes of traffic in a diagonal direction with cars screeching to a halt around you. But thankfully, you are alive. Your body has suffered little more than shock and bruises. The other vehicle? You've only just remembered that there was another vehicle. It came out of nowhere. It wasn't their road, it was yours. But are they okay? Shakily, you get out of your car and someone asks you if you are okay and should they call an ambulance. No, you say, and then you thank them for their kindness. What about the other vehicle? The people in the other car, like you, fortunately find that they're only shaken up and bruised. They don't need medical attention. Meanwhile, frustrated drivers wanting to get on their way begin hitting their horns. Beep, 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 move the cars. We want to be on our way. This is such a waste of time, they're calling out. And a couple of people push your vehicle to the side and you bend to pick up some broken pieces of car wreckage from off the road. Why are you doing that? That's off their car. They should be doing it. They should be clearing up. After all, they caused it. But you continue on autopilot anyway. And then you remember that you haven't even inspected the damage of your car yet. Undrivable. Flat tyre. Wheel arch badly buckled, probable damage to the axle. Call the breakdown truck. Meanwhile, the people from the other car come across and what? They're starting to have a go at you? The cheek of it! They caused it by not taking due care and attention when turning left into already flowing traffic. But there's no point in replying. They want to blame someone and that someone's you. Life can seem such a bummer at times. But let the police sort it. The insurance company sort it. Anybody sort it. Go and sit on the verge by your car. Wait. Remove yourself from the melee of voices. Find some quiet. And actually that reminds me of a story in the Bible from the Old Testament, a story from the life of David before he became the king of Israel. Let me read it to you, and as I do, watch it play out in your imagination. Bring it to the big screen of your life. It comes from 1 Samuel 30. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now, the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it and had taken captive the women and everyone else in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Now, let me put this into context for you. David and his men had been living amongst the Philistines in an area ruled by a Philistine leader called Achish, who was the son of Maoch, who was the king of Gath. At this point in his life, David was being hunted down by King Saul of Israel. When the Philistines went out to battle, Achish had made it quite clear that David and his men were expected to join in. I guess it was a thought of a kind of payment for living safely among the Philistines. It therefore must have been a bit of a raised eyebrow time by other Philistine leaders when these Israelites were called to ride out with the Philistines in order to, wait for it, fight against Israelites. Well, David and his men duly set out for Achish, but of course the other Philistine leaders didn't trust David. After all, surely these Israelites might swap sides at any moment and turn against the Philistines. Achish obviously didn't think that David and his men would do that, but in the end he was forced to send David and his men back to Ziklag. Just as well, really, but I'm sure God already knew what was happening and he needed to get David and his men back to camp anyway. Upon returning, David and his men find that the Amalekites have been raiding in the Negev and they've all but destroyed Ziklag. There's no one and nothing left. No wives, no children, no possessions. Now, what of course David and his men didn't know was that everyone had been captured, lock, stock and barrel, but that no one had been killed. Now, these men who'd returned to Ziklag were probably already tired, disappointed and frustrated that they weren't considered good enough to go out into battle. But to return to this, they wept, they wailed, and the Bible says they exhausted themselves still further with all that weeping and wailing. But really, can you blame them? Because given similar circumstances, I do wonder whether we would have behaved much differently. Well, to end this horrendous turn of events, we find that the men begin to turn on David. The Bible says David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. Ooh, stoning him? But then there comes in our text a few words that turn the frustrations of hopelessness, the disappointments that have come crowding in, and all those lost dreams into a possibility, into the hope of a resurrected dream. These are the words. But David found strength in the Lord his God. And really, this is the key to every side swipe of life that comes your way. To every disappointment and lost dream, those few words. But David found strength in the Lord his God. And that sentence can be the difference between life and death, between despair and hope, between failure and success. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Have you ever tried inserting your name into that sentence? I'll put my name in there and show you. But Gillian found strength in the Lord her God. But Ruth found strength in the Lord her God. But Justin found strength in the Lord his God. But Thomas found strength in the Lord his God. Try putting your name into that sentence and see how good and reassuring it sounds. I'll give you a moment to try it out right now. So what happened after David found strength in the Lord his God? Well, the Bible goes on to say, Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, Bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. Hope begins to arise. His thought process becomes clearer. Get the priest, Abiathar. Tell him to bring the ephod. Now, the ephod was a priestly garment normally worn by the high priest, but we do know that Samuel wore an ephod, and we know that David also wore an ephod at a later period than the one we're now thinking about, when he danced before the Ark of the Covenant as it was brought into Jerusalem. So asking for the ephod to be brought to him meant that David was essentially saying that he was putting on the garment of praise in order to worship God and hear from God. And so here is another key to overcoming the side swipes of life. Put on a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. It's time to seek God again, face to face, looking up, not turning anywhere else, not being distracted by anything. Praise really is a key in helping to resurrect those dreams and get them down from the shelves where they have long perhaps been consigned and lying in dust. That word was enough to lift their spirits, to cause hope to rise up in weary men. So, it says, David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, "Who do you belong to? Where do you come from?" He said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites, some territory belonging to Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burnt Ziklag." David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" He answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them." So physically, 200 of David's 600 men or so were literally too exhausted to go any further. And so it seems they set up some kind of a base camp so that they could look after anything that wasn't needed for the forthcoming battle, and where they could rest up and regain their strength. And meanwhile, the other 400 men were to continue, and eventually they came across the Egyptian lad in the field. Now, thankfully, they used some common sense and didn't just kill him. In fact, it seems as though this lad has been left behind because, just like David's 200 men, he was too exhausted to continue. But once they'd given him some food and water, he quickly revived, and then, more importantly, he was able to tell David what had actually happened at Ziklag. "Can you lead me to this raiding party?" asks David. "Yes," says the boy, "but only if you promise not to kill me or hand me over to my master." Well, I think that's a wise lad, because he's already had a master who's abandoned him simply because he lost his usefulness. So that lad's hopes and dreams had probably also died with the abandonment. But then comes along David, and all of a sudden his hopes and dreams can come up to the surface again. So another key is simply this: never give up hope. The Bible says that God makes ways even when there seem to be no ways. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Because God can make a way through the wilderness. He can cause streams to rise up, bring refreshing, even in the desert times. And he can split the seas, move mountains or any barrier before us, and allow us to walk through on dry, solid ground. He can conquer any giant and bring victory to his children. He can close the mouths of lions, providing safety. He can open prison doors, setting us free. He can protect us from flames of adversity. He can carry us through any storm. He's the God of miracles. He never changes, for he's the same yesterday, today, forever. So back to the Egyptian lad. He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking and revelling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they'd taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." I love those verses. You just see God's hand all over them. These Amalekites think they've outsmarted everyone, so the last thing that they are expecting is an attack from the enemy. They're eating, they're drinking, and they are partying. They've got the plunder all around them. And then comes the attack, this time from David and his 400 men. And there's another valuable key here. If God is for you, who can be against you? Although no doubt tired, because after all David had already left 200 men behind from exhaustion, they fought from dusk until evening of the next day. Only 400 Amalekites who happened to have camels managed to escape. And then God's blessing. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they'd taken. David brought everything back. Isn't that so God? Nothing was missing. David and his men weren't losers, they were victors. They recovered everything stolen from them, but then they gained a whole lot of Amalekite livestock as well. Bible tells us, then David came to the 200 men who'd been too exhausted to follow him and who were left behind at the Bezor Valley. They came out to meet David and the men with him. As David and his men approached, he asked them how they were. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down in the battle. All will share alike." David made this a statute and ordinance for Israel from that day to this. David returns as a victor, but he doesn't lord it over the 200 men who just couldn't continue. "How are you?" he asks, showing genuine concern. But that genuine concern is not shared by all his men. And some of them were saying, "Because they didn't go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered." However, each man may take his wife and children and go." Oh, that actually makes me laugh. They wanted to keep the plunder, but not the wives or the children, because they might have proved troublesome, mightn't they? But David steps in and he diffuses the situation. How does he do it? He points to God. The Lord is the source of their victory and their restored hope. The Lord protected them and delivered the raiding party into their hands. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. That's what it says in Deuteronomy 6:4. And the Lord is the key to our victories, to our restored hope, and to our reawakened dreams. So share, and share alike. More than that, be generous. Because in verse 26 of the passage we're reading, it says, "When David reached Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, 'Here is a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies.'" So let's end by reviewing those key points from this passage that I think will help us to restore our hopes and dreams when life comes along and sideswipes us. Firstly, David found strength in the Lord his God. And we need to find our strength in the Lord our God. Secondly, David put on a garment of praise, the ephod, instead of despair. And we likewise need to endeavour at all times to keep wearing that garment of praise. So just run this check through your life. How much time do you spend enjoying God? And how much time do you spend talking and, for instance, criticising the government, corporations, big business? How much time do you willingly offer help and support to other people? And how often do you ignore an opportunity to offer support and help someone? If you honestly take a look at your response in those areas, you will probably find your answer, and you may find some things that you need to pray through and readdress the balance of. Even when things look grim, never give up hope. That's our third point. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Point 4, if God is for you, who can be against you? And point 5, Deuteronomy 6:4. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. So let me close by speaking God's reassuring word over you as a kind of prayer of a washing, of a cleansing, of refreshing. Words that I think will restore hope, well-being, dignity, love and peace. Psalm 32 verse 8 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you." Deuteronomy 32:10 says, "In a desert land he found him, in a barren and howling waste. He shielded him and cared for him. He guarded him as the apple of his eye." Deuteronomy 11:12. "It is a land the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end." Psalm 121 verse 8. "The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore." I hope you've enjoyed this time, and I hope it's been helpful either now or future time. But until next time, enjoy the journey.